And thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks everybody for having me out here. I think I met Kurt at the Tri chapter.
Yep.
That was in April, I think, timeframe.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, anybody else go to that?
Spencer is the only other one, and
Okay.
he's our next president, but he's not here.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. So Kurt and I met, and he asked me to come out and talk about some of the workforce data we're looking at, and we'll also talk about AI. I heard somebody says workforce and Al, which is totally understandable. If never used AI, then that could look like Al for sure. We'll talk about that more later, and that's kind of the game plan today. So I've got a lot of data. It might be overwhelming, but that's not my intent. Trust me. My intent is to tell a story about where things currently are in the markets and where things might be going and how that affects us every day in facility management, because there's major shifts, what's happening, and it's important, I think, for us to keep mindful of what's actually happening with us. Let me get this set up here, and I don't know, maybe it's not going to work. Okay, there we go. So about our group, Simplar, it's just a made-up name. We're a group of researchers and consultants, faculty members at University of North Carolina in Charlotte. I'll tell you what, it was a lot warmer in Charlotte than here. I did check the weather. I did bring a jacket, but this is it's like go time for rain. In Charlotte, yesterday I think Sunday was like 82 or something like that. So it's a lot warmer here. So anyways, we're Simplar. We work with a lot of different groups. So we do a lot of different things. We work with both owners and contractors to do project delivery, facilities, not management on the technical side of things, but rather how to engage with our industry partners and some things to think about with that. We've done a lot of projects over the years, a lot of different areas. We actually got started in roofing, of all things, years ago, and that has expanded out to all sorts of different areas. Lots of different projects. So we do a ton of work with IFMA, a lot of the benchmarking reports. The North American report, our team produces that, and a bunch of other studies the other day. I'll talk about that a little bit at the end, but that's kind of what we're working on here. So, okay. So the data we'll talk about is it's pretty recent, September, October timeframe. There's always when you collect data from different sources, they all come out at different times. It's not like they have, okay, October 1st, we'll update all the metrics. This all happens kind of randomly. So this is updated-ish the last few weeks here. So it's pretty recent. If you are going to rely on this data, you should update it on a regular basis because there are changes with the election last week. That's also going to have impacts in certain degrees. And so we'll talk about that. Okay, so stuff has gotten more expensive recently. Yes, obviously that's why we know that. And the reason why we know that is, well, there's two different ways to look at that. The red line on top here is called the PPI, or the Producer Price Index. And that's a measure of how much it costs for manufacturers, contractors, producers to make stuff. The blue line on the bottom is called the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index. It's a measure of us as buyers of stuff, what it feels like in terms of previously how much things are costing you. So ideally, you want these two lines to do what? You want them to be the same and hopefully going steady, maybe down, but at least you want them together. What we're seeing here now is that if you produce stuff for your contractor, it's been tough. Since COVID, it's really been tough because you sign like a fixed price agreement and then your materials go up in cost, right? So from a contractor's vendor supplier standpoint, it's been challenging. From a facility standpoint, you're probably also seeing costs go up, things cost more, and it's a very difficult time from a costing standpoint, right? These are raw materials. Doesn't matter what the data shows, but for a long time, especially after COVID, everything was all over the place, and things have now stabilized a little bit, which is really good. We look at the raw cost of different materials because that affects how much it costs us to do this. Now, this is adjusted to construction. I have a lot of construction data, and the reason why is because construction is good bellwether for the overall markets, and especially for facilities, right? It's not directed facility maintenance per se, but it's a good sign of what's happening in our markets as well. So again, red line is PPI, the cost of making stuff. The black line is construction bids. So when I gave this presentation about a year or so ago, the message was, if you're going to build stuff, renovate things, you should do it like yesterday because costs are only to keep up here. What the data is showing us here is that things have stabilized a little bit from a construction bidding standpoint, and all signs are suggesting that it's going to be like that for a while, right? So that's a good sign. The data gets updated about every 3 months or so. So December next month, we should have an update as to what that's looking like, but things have started to stabilize, right? This is a survey from general contractors asking them about what are the biggest sources of cost increases or what are your concerns. Rising interest rates, financing costs has been a major challenge. The whole interest rate thing in the Fed is really quite interesting, right? Because on the one hand, we like lower interest rates because the cost of getting money costs us less, right? But the same hand or a different hand to say if you invest in different things, especially like bonds and savings accounts and things like that, then you want to see higher interest rates. So there's competing interests in terms of what these mean. But the Fed cut the rate a quarter percentage of a point. I think it was last week because the day after the election they dropped it a little bit. We'll see what happens. I think they meet again in January, I believe. So we'll see what happens then if they're going to continue lowering or keep the study, and we'll see what happens from there. Trump wants the interest rates to drop. There's a big fight brewing potentially between him and Jerome Powell, who's the chair of the Fed. There's lots of different political things about that, but that's currently written. But the main thing is to lower interest rates, right? And then there's other concerns as well in terms of what's actually happening with that. There's another measure when you think about what does the future look like in terms of activity levels. Another measure is called the Dodge Momentum Index. And Dodge is a measure of the percentage relatively to last year, the last quarter, how many projects are in planning stages. So if you have projects that are being planned out, permits being issued, different things like that, then from an activity standpoint, things being built, contractors busy standpoint, that's a good precursor as to what's actually happening, right? Now, we've been tracking this data, not just Dodge, but all this different data for a long time. And the last 6 to 12 months, things have been getting really weird, especially at the entities that provide that data. Specifically, the census and Dodge and other things like that, right? They have gone back and revised data several times now over the last 6 months, right? And there's the reality of what happened means that it's really hard to collect some of the stuff, and so they have to adjust. That's one theory. And maybe conspiracy theory is like, well, if the market looks one way after certain things happen, then they revise their data. That can help different people give a story. We're not going to talk about that here today, but the point is that from tracking data standpoint, they have continued to revise data. So what does that mean from my standpoint is that I'm less confident in some of the data, especially when we see really weird things like this. On the right-hand side of this here, oh, can't see that, but on the right-hand side, you see where it like rocket ship, where it takes off here? That would suggest to us that contractors have gone significantly more busy in the last 6 to 9 months, which is true. I mean, this anecdote to talk to folks, they're definitely more busy here, but if you look at the slope of that line on the right-hand side, I mean, maybe in 22 after COVID kind of picked up, but besides that, I mean, that's a very unusual thing to see, right? So we'll see what happens next quarter if they adjust it down or if it truly is a spike, but it's quite interesting. Yeah.
When you say spike, is it due to being busy, or is it all based on dollar volume, or is that how you're?
I think it's based on the number of projects, so it's like a quantity, number of jobs that are currently in project status is what that's a measure of. So there's a lot more activity in terms of projects being planned and permitted and things like that, is what this is suggesting. It's actual project numbers, yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know. We'll keep an eye on that. I encourage you all to track this. So part of what I want to do here today with the presentation is to help us be better consumers of data, right? None of the stuff is private, it's all publicly available. So you can track all this on your own here, and we'll see what happens. From a facilities management standpoint, why this is relevant to us here is that if our service providers, contractors start getting busy, which is what this would suggest to us, then once they get down to the maintenance side of things, after all these buildings are built, their ability to find people to do all this work, because if you're a mechanical contractor who's working on a new commercial office space, you probably also do maintenance work, right? And it's all kind of the same thing here. And so looking at what happens to construction will have an impact on our everyday work in terms of facilities. There's other things to look at in terms of future work. This is from ENR Engineering News Record. Again, mostly construction focused, but they have what's called an executive confidence index. So they ask CEOs and different folks and contractors that can be more busy. What's the future look like? It's kind of gone down in terms of, do they feel the future is going to be good? But again, that's kind of a qualitative type thing. this is the our cost report. The only reason why I like to talk about this, again, a lot of data here, is to point out two major things with this. Is that the first thing is that when you look at the commercial office spaces, 70% of firms that work in that space are reporting decreasing activity. 71%. So that's a huge impact on facilities because most of our space is commercial. And if there's a huge decline in commercial office space, then that certainly has impacts in terms of what does facilities look like in the future, right? There's no spaces for people to maintain and watch over, then that has impacts for the long run, right? So, and the whole like work from home, work from not in the office space, I don't think that debate is actually resolved yet, right? There is some IT, type like Meta, for example, or Facebook, they have said you all can work from home for forever, right? The other hand, though, I think it was Amazon. It was Amazon and JP Morgan Chase, although they were much early on, they said you all need to get back to the office, and that's the end of the story, right? So there's a lot of debate out there, and so that we're not fully seeing the impacts of that. Education, that's kind of picking up. Retail is going down, but the big sectors is manufacturing, IT. We're seeing huge increases in those spaces, partly driven by AI, but there's other things that are also driving that as well. So, spending in construction, this is relative to last year, the percentage in change in terms of total dollars spent by different sectors. Look at data centers, a 70% increase since a year ago in terms of overall construction spending in data centers, right? And of course, that's driven by AI. I mean, so I know one person that use AI all the time. Anybody else use AI on a pretty regular basis? Not really? Okay, fantastic. Okay, all right. Who is out? Fantastic, yeah. So one thing about AI, we'll talk about this a little bit later. I want to give, not talk all of it now here, but when you think about AI, the data requirements in terms of like data centers is like enormous, right? And the power to run all that, the water needs for all that. I mean, it's a huge utilities infrastructure standpoint that is quite substantial.
Question for you on that water needs.
Yeah.
I just heard that recently about AI taking up water.
Yeah.
How is that?
For cooling.
For cooling.
Cooling all the data centers. So if you
So is it okay, uses water for cooling, but is that consumption of water or is that recirculation of water?
some of it's probably recirculation, but just the total amount of water to do is a big part of that. But even more so is the power to do all that. Like we all know, I mean, the cost to cool water is not cheap, right? Let alone the cost to like run the computer cards, right? So imagine like imagine this room right here is the data center floor. Floor to ceiling here, nothing but GPUs, which are like special types of computer chips. This floor to ceiling packed with this to run a small part of what AI can do for us, right? The utility needs, in fact, the main limit that we're hitting right now is literally we cannot get enough power to run these facilities. So like Amazon, OpenAI, and a couple others are looking at the fund or to run all these facilities is starting to work called mini nuclear reactors. So they can't get enough power from the cities and the counties to produce what they need. In fact, there's a project, I can't say who it is, but there's a big company that's building new data centers. They talked to the local utilities, said, we'll provide these many megawatts. They built the project, started designing it, and said, actually, we can't produce that much. What you all are asking, private company, we as a utility cannot meet your needs here. So what do? They have to reduce the size of their data centers. So power needs, generation, all these other things are a huge part of it. And we'll see what happens with it, right? The infrastructure bill. So that was passed in November of 21. That's for the roads and bridges and other related infrastructure. That's been talked about for like 30 years. We've been talking about it for a long time. It finally got passed in November 21. And that's a whole lot of money, about north of $1 trillion. So why is it relevant to us is that was passed in November 21. It's now 3 years later. That money is just now starting to hit the streets, right? So why is that relevant to us is that there's a whole ton of money coming now to build out all these different projects here. So we're busy today in terms of construction, but when you look to the future, it's going to be even more busy because there's all this money coming out. But this is one of them, right? There's other things too. It's in terms of future work, other things that are happening. One of the things that's happening is called decarbonization. All heard about decarb and what might happen with that. It's basically the idea that our buildings produce the power that they use, or at least try to match those requirements, right? And there's other things with it too, right? There are some cities right now. In fact, there was a workshop at IFMA Workplace 2 years ago. It was with the city of Denver, that they have passed laws that if your building doesn't meet a certain EUI, then you're going to get fined or taxed by the government. Public and private, doesn't matter. If you don't perform at a certain level from a building standpoint, then you're going to be taxed for it, right? So from a facility standpoint, that becomes kind of a difficult conversation, right? I mean, if you got all these broken ceiling tiles, all these other maintenance needs that you have, now you have to retrofit your buildings to perform at a certain energy level. Where do we get the money to do all that, right? Now, the government will likely provide some money to do some of that, but it's not going to be enough. It's a big political thing that's happening. Decarb is it's happening, right? The other thing that's kind of happening too is, with all the different acts that the Congress has passed, is really what this is reindustrialization of the United States. So for a long time, a lot of our core manufacturing was done where? China, elsewhere overseas, right? And because of COVID and other things that happened with that, like computer chips, those were produced in Taiwan and in China and other locations of the world. COVID happened, messed up everything. And so they're trying to bring a lot of those different things back here to the United States. That's why you see all these major infrastructure manufacturing jobs, because they want to avoid some of those things in the future, right? That's ongoing right now. There's hundreds of billions of dollars being spent on that. It's likely going to continue for the future. And so there's signs that the work is going to continue being busy in the future. Now, all this said here is that we've all seen everything that's happened in the Middle East and also in Ukraine and Russia. If that thing spirals completely out of control, who knows what's happening? That could certainly have an impact in terms of what that future looks like. Right? So it's really quite interesting to watch what's happening. Right? This happened a few weeks ago. We all saw one thing that happened is with the pagers. Yeah. And that's like James Bond, like 007 type stuff. To blow up thousands of pagers all at the same time is just crazy, right? So there's a lot of things that are happening with that, and it certainly may have an impact. I read that North Korean troops are now fighting with the Russians. That's a new development, right? I have not seen that before. So we'll see what happens, but that will certainly have an impact in terms of our day-to-day work as here in the US. So, okay. So I want to talk about now a couple of the macroeconomic things, kind of step up even further here and kind of look at things that we've seen before, right? There's things that are happening nowadays that have happened maybe years ago, but there's things we've seen happen before. But there's also things we haven't seen before, right? So blue is things we've kind of seen before, red is not so much. And a few guiding principles as we kind of do this, right? We're navigating by the stars under cloudy skies. Anybody know who said that? That was Jerome Powell. This is about 6 months ago when they're trying to deal with all this, right? History never repeats itself, but it does often rhyme, right? Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Who said that? Famous boxer. Who was it?
Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson. There we go. Yep. And of course, put clown in the charge, so you get a circus. So that's how we're going to approach this next section here, is to kind of think about that, right? The funds rate. This is the interest rate. We've seen the current interest levels before. In fact, if you go back to the 70s and 80s, it was way higher, right? Anybody bought a house in the 70s, 80s? Yeah, right? My parents, I mean, they bought our house when I was a kid. The interest rate was like 13 or 14%. It's a lot higher than it was today here. So we've seen this before. This is not unseen territory here, right? And of course, there's pressure to lower that down even further, but we'll see what happens. What we've not seen before is the ratio of national debt and the deficit, right? So when COVID happened, the government spent a ton of money to pay for unemployment and things like that. In fact, there's people that earn more money on unemployment than actually working at their job. And I know people like that. They were teachers that they earned a certain amount. They went on unemployment because they got let go or COVID or whatever. They went on unemployment and they got paid more money than when they were working, right? Now, ignoring the whole economics of like motivation to continue working, all sorts of things, that's just what happened. They spent a lot of money on it, right? So this shows the total debt. It's approaching $36 trillion. And we just say those two numbers, like 36 trillion. I mean, it's hard for us to like conceptualize how much money that actually is, right? That's a lot of money, right? It's gone up significantly. There's different things that are happening. We're continuing to set records for the deficit. In fact, there's an estimate in 10 years that the interest on debt will be the #1 thing that we spend from in our country, right? Followed by that is going to be Social Security and military. Now, why is the interest payment such a big deal? I mean, you can put that in the same breath as like Social Security and military spending or Medicare.
Because that's less you can spend on elsewhere.
There you go. It's less, it's opportunity cost of not being able to do other things here. But the other thing with that too is interest payments, they don't produce anything. It allows you to have access to the money. That's true here, but the actual interest payments, it's not producing anything. It's just we borrow this money and we'll pay you back. There's no economic, no real direct benefit attached to that, and that's a whole other sort of thing there that's going to happen, right? So when you think about what's going to happen here and kind of step this down further here, now this is, I'm going to say this is not conspiracy theory, but if you just walk with me for a minute here, deductively walk through what might happen, right? If interest is such a significant part of what we spend on, and you're the federal government looking at all this money here, how do you pay less money on all this debt? We have to pay back all this debt here. What's your incentive, or how do you make this easier to pay back all this money? Lowering the interest rates, right? So when we talk about lowering the interest rates, it's not just for the consumers. The federal government has a very strong interest in lowering those interest rates. And really, there's kind of three main things that might happen with this, right? One is they cut services to pay for that debt. So like if any politician ever says, we're going to cut Social Security, what's going to happen? People are going to lose their minds, right? Because, well, I paid in this for 40 years and now you're going to cut it? Not going to happen. So we're not going to cut Social Security, right? The second option is to make cuts in other non-Social Security programs. Is that going to happen? Probably not, right? So what is going to happen, most likely, is what? Print more money. If you have more money, just print it, because they can do that. That means they can pay back these debts, and the cost or the value of the US dollar goes where? Okay. So therefore, if you take this a step further here, then, is that the value of like certain types of investments is not as worthy, right? So things like stocks, far more valuable. Because can the government print more stocks? No. Can the government print more houses? No way, real estate, right? So the types of things that might be of value going into the future, especially as inflation continues to rise and more money is printed, certain types of assets are going to be far more valuable. But getting back to our discussion here is that it's a big deal. Interest is a big deal, and other things we've kind of looked at, right? GDP growth. GDP growth is a good thing to track, because when the GDP is increasing, that means there's activity, people are doing things. It's a good measure of what's happening. You certainly see the spikes. 2008, that was the recession and all that mess. 2020, that huge drop off was COVID, but that very quickly rebounded. So that's not really a big deal here. So we've seen what we're at before. This is fairly typical in terms of the growth rates. But again, what we've not seen here before is the ratio of debt to GDP. This is unusual. It's not seen this before. Typically, when your debt goes really high, the best way to cut that is to like stop being in wars. So if you look at Civil War, World War I, World War II, huge increases in debt to GDP, the war ends and that corrects itself. Nowadays, are there any major wars that we can like be out of or stop? Not really, right? There's not really, not like World War II, right? So there's not a whole lot of cutting power that the government can do easily, like there was back in 60, 70 years ago. I'm interested, right? So again, we've not seen this before. Debt's very high. Debt to GDP is also very high. Interest rate is not that high, but again, the GDP ratios and the growth is what's different today compared to what it was, 40 years ago or so, right? Now, this one is super interesting. One historical way to look at is a recession coming? And a recession, by definition, is when the GDP goes down. We get smaller, it contracts as an economy, right? Historically, the best way to predict that was what's called the yield curve on bonds. And basically what that is here is that you look at, if you expect the market to tank, you buy bonds, because bonds have a guaranteed return when you buy those from the government. And if you expect the market to go down, you buy bonds because that can insulate us from different things happening. Every single time that the yield curve from those bonds has gone below zero, there's always been a recession. Every single time for like the last, 50 or 70 years, we have seen that, right? The bond curve went negative in 2021. 3 years ago. And we've still not had a recession. So what this means to us is, one, a recession is coming, and we just haven't seen it yet. Or two, that this measure of looking at bond yields is no longer a valid way to look at things, right? So again, when we look at this data here, there's a lot of weird stuff that's happening, things that we've not seen here before, and it's like, well, how do we interpret this? And I don't know, right? So we should definitely keep an eye on this here because it's really quite interesting, right? Percentages of likelihood of a recession going to happen. So May, the Fed estimated there's a 70% chance of a recession. September, it went down to 57%, and the new data hasn't come out yet, so we'll see what happens with that. Money supply, there's lots of cash out there. Not really kind of seen that before, but it's gone up and down. Again, that huge spike in 21 is the government payouts because of COVID. That's unusual, but we'll see what happens with that. Mortgage rates, again, we talked about this real estate. We've kind of been here before and not. Again, we've been here before in terms of the interest rates, we talked about that. But what we've not been here before is the relative prices of homes. That's unusual, right? The interest rates are low, but the overall cost of buying homes is quite high, right? So I have friends that live like in Phoenix, Vegas, Florida. Housing prices are just insane there, right? Just crazy. So we'll see what happens with that. Right? Really what this means here is that if there's younger people that are trying to buy homes, it's virtually impossible unless you have a ton of cash to be able to do some of that. And it's a hard place to be in. Commercial real estate, again, we talked about this earlier here. There's folks that think it's going to completely crash out. I mean, there's major, I don't know what the vacancies look like here in Green Bay in terms of like office space that's available for rent. Some places it's just been decimated. I mean, San Francisco, for example, there's a building, I forgot the name of it, but it was sold probably 4 or 5 years ago for, I think it was like $390, $400 million. They put it back on the market like a year ago, like $70 million. Just completely fallen off. And now San Francisco is extreme for lots of reasons here, but it's kind of interesting to look at the commercial real estate base for what's happening, right? Loan delinquencies, those have been, obviously COVID will cause people to miss different things when there's job challenges, but we've kind of looked at that. And then finally, this kind of brings us to workforce. And this is kind of where things, in my view, get really kind of interesting. All right, so a lot of economic stuff, a lot of data here. Let's talk about workforce just for a few minutes here, right? So a lot of folks are having trouble finding folks, especially in the trades, the technical jobs. We kind of know that it's really hard to find people. Mental health is a huge challenge. I know we kind of talked about this as well. It's just, it's a major struggle, especially for a lot of younger people. In fact, I teach a lot of these kids at the university, and the amount of stress that we're seeing students come in is just crazy, right? The many students I had cry during exams is unreal, right? It's like, it's crazy, right? Another example, so one of the things I have my students do, I teach a construction methods class. How do you build things? How do you construct, ground out their whole kind of stuff. And what they have them do is I have them interview, they have groups of like 3 or 4 students, they'll interview like different trade contractors. So you guys interview masons, they'll interview carpenters, concrete guys, and so forth. And they go out and talk to them. This last semester, this is in March of this year, when they were to present that, they're talking to me and said, Dr. Smithwick, we can't get contractor respondents. I said, okay, that's fine. They're busy, I know, but just be persistent. Did you guys follow up with them? Well, no. Okay. Just send an email and then reply to us. I'm like, okay. Did you call them on the phone? Like, no, we just sent an email and didn't do it. Okay, right? So what I'm going to do here for this next semester is like, we're going to have a class on literally how do you make a phone call? Yeah. How do you talk?
Oh, what's that?
Yeah. How do you network with people? Because it's really, well, I mean, there's younger project people that come into our job sites or onto our organizations that like, they don't know how to like follow up with them, how to actually get things, how to follow through on what they're supposed to be doing, right? It's a major struggle here. And It's really quite interesting, right?
Are you going to have some joint organization too for networking?
Yes, so we have a very active IFMA student chapter. Thank you for bringing that up here. It's a great opportunity, and I encourage them to do all that. Construction is, I mean, we had these struggles with my construction students, but I think outside of construction on some of these other career fields, it's way more challenging. And we'll talk about this a little bit here, but it's really quite interesting, right? This is surveys of contractors. Again, look at this here. Percentage of firms with openings for hourly craft positions. This year, 94% of them can't find craft people. Last year, 85%. Salary positions. This year, 79%. Last year, 69%, right? And we just cannot find enough people. And we just talked to you, is it going to be more busy or less busy in the future? It's going to be more busy.
This is construction.
These are just construction. Yeah.
Okay.
Which again has related to FM, but same whole idea, right? So it's really quite interesting. Now this thing is super interesting. The red line is the number of hires, people being hired. The blue line is the number of job openings. So typically you have more people being hired than our job openings. Right here in 21, those two lines swapped. Very first time ever. It corrected itself, and we'll see if it goes back to that. But why this is important here is that what this shows us is that we literally cannot find enough physical human beings to do the work that needs to get done. And you're losing people as they get older and start retiring, right? The baby boomers, when do they start retiring? Now, in the next 2 years and 3 years, it's going to be like, oh, it's called the silver tsunami. Well, all these people start retiring, right? It's really quite, I didn't make that out here, but if you like it, you can use it, right? Yes. Yeah. So it's interesting because you think about it, you know, those folks that are retiring, that are starting to leave the workforce, I mean, they're some of our most productive people that know how to get things done, have all this technical knowledge, and they're going to start retiring, right? So let's keep talking about this because there's more implications of what this here. Now, this is, got to break this down a little bit, but I think this is probably one of the most interesting charts that we'll talk about today here. The blue line is non-residential spending in construction. The black line is total construction employment, okay? And here's where this gets interesting. If you look on the right-hand side, whereas, maybe I don't know about my mouse here, so let me just kind of point this out. So if you look at this data right here, let me put my chart, my laser pointer. So right here, when you look at this, right? What is this right here?
COVID.
That's COVID, okay? So people lost jobs. Now what's interesting, this is really fascinating. When COVID happened, we're not going to get into politics here, but when COVID happened, there's a certain group of people that were the most resistant to getting the vaccine. And that group of people is contractors, workers. They said, you know what? I'd rather die than get the vaccine. There's a bunch of people like that in construction. So a lot of them said, you know what? Vaccine mandate? No, I'm out. We're tired. Done, right? So a bunch of people left, right? A bunch of people left here. And after COVID was over, they recovered, right? And they came back. And so that's what this uptick here. So we lost, you know, half the people eventually came back. But here's where this gets really interesting. Who are the people that came back after the market started recovering? Was it the same people that had left before? No, because they said, I'm done, right? So who's coming back? It's new people, younger people that have not really worked in construction before, right? Now, why is that such a big deal? Well, look at the blue line. Again, the blue line is money, spending, right? If you look on the right-hand side, basically from 2022 and onward, the cost of construction has rocket ship, taken off significantly. Now, some of that is inflation. Some of that is the cost of materials is going up, and we understand, right? But I think also part of this here is think about the people who are coming back. What's partially explaining that increase? Productivity. Now, again, I've not seen reports about that, but when we look at all the evidence here and think about who's now working in construction, I think part of that increase here is because of lack of skills and productivity, right? Instead of paying somebody, you know, 2 hours to do a certain job, now they have to take 3 or 4 hours to do the same thing. That costs us more money to do that, right? So things are getting more challenging. There's lots of different issues with that, and it's really, really quite fascinating, right? Other workforce challenges. So historically, the way we convince people to work in the trades or construction is to do what? Pay them more money. Historically, it's usually about 25% above the national average. That now is 16 to 18%. above the national average. So the value proposition to younger fields, to other people that come and work in construction is, well, we're not going to pay you, we'll pay you more, but not as much as we used to, right? It's hot outside or really cold, right? It's really difficult to do this work. And so come and work for us. The value proposition to get people to work in this industry is not always very strong. And that's why we're seeing these other things. Okay, couple of final thoughts about as we look at this here. Okay, since year 2000, as the U.S. population, this is not just construction, this overall as a population, have we gotten older or younger since 2000? Older, yep, by about 3.5 years on average. Okay, is this trend accelerating or decelerating? Accelerating, right? It's getting faster. In fact, 21 was the most rapid year increase across that 2 decades time. And so people are getting older faster, right? So talk about workforce challenges here. And this is like really like, I'm not going to jump on the table here. It's like shout how big a deal this is. But this chart tells us why this is such a big deal, right? So when you think about the people that are leading the workforce, and look at these two charts here. The green line is 2019. That's census data. That's the most recent year available. 2019. The white boxes are 2010 data. That's the last time the census was available. When you look at 2010 compared to 2019, what do you see as a major difference between those 2 years, those 2 decades? Not as many kids. The birth rates are dropping off, especially for younger people. But also, look in the very middle of that chart. There's more people retiring. And it's kind of like they have a gap. This is called the missing gap. Ages, 40 to 55, 60. Compared to 2010 to today, those people are gone. Well, they're older. They're not in the workforce anymore, right? So why is this such a big deal? There it is. Productivity. The most productive people in our organizations are this age range. In fact, people that are in this age range they just get things done without us even knowing about it. They kind of set the culture of how we operate as an organization. So the question then becomes here is like, well, what percentage of that prime key workforce can you lose before we're not successful? Can we lose 2%, 5%, 15, 20%? And where is that line at here? And it's a big deal, right? We talk about birth rates. So in 2020, the birth rate was 4% lower than 2019. Now, part of that is because of COVID. If we're worried that the world is on fire and people aren't really interested in having babies, okay? But it hasn't corrected itself. 2021, it went up by 1%. 22 and 23, up by 0.9% in both of those years. 1990, 31% higher. 1950, 102% higher. The birth rate is completely fallen off the map. And there's lots of reasons for it, right? There's changes in expectations, there's financial considerations, there's a lot of other things here that are affecting this here. But the reality is here is that there are fewer younger people that are being born today, right? This next chart here is the government defines this as prime age male workforce, prime age. I was in participation contractors a few months ago, and I said prime age 25 to 54. He says, well, I'm 55, I'm still prime age, so you need to change your definition. Well, it's not me, it's the government, so whatever, right? Okay. What this shows here is the percentage of men ages 25 to 54 that can work, are able to work, but are not working. They're not disabled. There's no other reasons here. They're not working, right? Why is this such a big deal? Who does most of the construction like hands-on work? It's men ages 25 to 54. So if we're seeing a decline of this population of presenting here or working, then this is kind of a big deal. The other question here too to think about this is, when did millennials enter the workforce? Right there. That's when this group of people that are able to work in the workforce and it drops off even further, right? Yep, 2007. Yep, that's when they came in. And when you look at the participation rate, completely falls off, right? Kind of interesting. There's also other things here too. Baby boomers. I need to update. Oh, I did update the numbers. All right, good. Baby boomers, as a generation of people, as far as we can tell, generated more wealth in the entire history of planet Earth. $80 trillion of wealth generated by that group of people. Now, why is that a big deal? When these baby boomers start passing away, what's going to happen to all that money?
kids are gonna throw it away on worthless stuff.
Okay,
And not work.
inheritance, yes, okay. Some of that's gonna go to, well, this is an offensive term, but the death tax. That's a big talk right now. Why? Because there's $80 trillion that are sitting out there and the government wants to get their hands on it, right? So that's part of it, but most of it, as was pointed out here, is gonna go to the kids who may or may not waste it, right? But that's a different discussion, right? But why is that relevant to us here? If I am, if mom or dad passes away and somebody gets a bunch of money, what's their incentive to continue working? Not very strong, right? Because they have all this money.
Well, the debt ratios nowadays, though.
Well,
That
that's
money's
true,
just
right?
Debt to get even for a lot of them.
That's true, right? That could certainly happen, right? But I mean, I had a friend, his dad passed away. He was a project manager for a large construction company. He got a ton of money, kept working. And he said one day, he's like, you know what? I'm just one bad meeting away from just quitting. One bad email, and I'm done, right? Because there's no need for them to keep working, right? The other question is, well, when that wealth transfer does happen, how old are these people that are going to receive this money? How old are they typically when they start getting this money? 40 to 50s, which we just talked about. Who's your most productive demographic? 40 to 50s. So we don't have enough people. Wealth transfer happens. Now we have way not enough people. It's only going to get worse in the future, right? Women ages 25 to 34 live with their parents and with a spouse. First time since 1880, right? Now, if you live with your parents, that's okay, right? But I'm just telling you, this is different, okay? Drugs are a huge problem, right? Like, I don't think most people are aware, like, how big of a deal this is here, especially in construction. So again, I don't have personal experience with this, but if you're to think of it a scale for like 1 to 100, 100 being like most addictive, marijuana might be like, I don't know, like a 2 or a 3, right? Cocaine, methamphetamine, that might be like a 9 or a 10. Today's modern drugs are like a 90. Like you try it once, that's it, you're hooked for life, right? So construction, manual labor, hard on the bodies, they go to the doctor, get an opioid, and they're hooked. That's it, right? And 2.5 million men that could work that are not working because of their drug addiction, right? So you can say, well, just lower the standards. Okay, do you want somebody that's, you know, high, run your excavators for doing different things? I don't think so, right? That's a disaster, right? So there's other demographics. 2.5 million women left the workforce since February 2020. Still growing demographics, only get challenging going forward. Okay. This is a population histogram. This is male to females. This is 1960. Now I'm going to go through here some decades. I want you to look at how does the shape of this overall chart change, right? Our entire economic engine here in the US is built on our society looking like this. That's a big deal, right? Because you have a bump in the middle, your most productive people who buy stuff for people on the bottom, their kids, right? And a smaller group on top who are kind of investing in different projects that the middle people are working on. That's how basically how all the financial stuff works here in the US, right? 1960. Okay. Here's 1980. Here's 2000. And here's 2000. What is this looking more like now? Instead of a pyramid, it's more like a mushroom. Now, why is that such a big deal? We have a bunch of people on top, a bunch of older people. Is that costly or not costly? It's extremely costly. And now the burden falls on who to pay for all that. It's people in the middle age, right? And their kids someday, right? So this is, when we talked about like all these like Social Security falling apart, that's a common thing that's been talked about for years and years and years, right? This is why this is such a big deal, right? In fact, it's estimated Social Security is going to run out of money in the next 10 to 15 years if something doesn't change. It does. Because you've been paying into it. Yeah. Now, if you're older, closer to retirement age, guess what? If you're middle-aged, things are okay. If you're young, like 20s, it's toast, right? It's going to be very difficult going forward. That's why I talked to my kids. I got 3 of them. They're 13, 11, and 9. And we talked, my son, we had a really good conversation about Social Security and tax and how that works. And in fact, he's really kind of interested in that when he learned and realized that taxes come out of everything, he was pretty upset about it. well, dude, it is what it is. I mean, that's why you need to, anyways, we talked, right?
Except for grandma's birthday.
Except for grandma's birthday, that's right, yeah.
Has anybody started to factor in, frankly, the worsening longevity of the average adult male and female?
Well,
The
there's,
fact that they aren't going to be living to their mid-80s, possibly on average.
there's different things to think about that, right? Because longevity, so the US, compared to like, I think of Japan, the longevity here in the US is not nearly as high as for Japanese people, right? And there's all sorts of different things like diets and things like that could affect that right here. But at the same time, I mean, longevity certainly has gone up compared to, the 50s and 40s. But at the same time, there's also different things that are happening. So it's really, in my mind, I don't think that the whole longevity thing is exactly resolved. But the data would suggest that people are continuing to get older here. And if, the other option we talked about earlier is that one way to deal with the Social Security issue is to do what? Raise retirement age. And are people going to be happy about that? France last year, now France is different, right? I think their retirement age, somebody knows, shout it out. I think their current retirement age is,
Pretty bold.
it's like 58.
But
58,
they only work like 35 hours a week.
35 hours a week,
And
58.
They wanted to raise their to 40 hours a week, and they were just like.
Yeah, they literally, they wanted to raise that, and they also want to raise it to, I think it was 59 years old, or 59, right? And they literally had riots. They lost their minds, right? Now, again, not political, I'm just telling you what's out there, and y'all can decide for yourselves what you think about that, but that's the reality of what this is. Again, if you raise your retirement age, people are not going to be happy. So it's a difficult position here, right? This is interesting. This is the percentage of the population, percentage of the 60-year-olds of the population. So 2020, 25%, and you project that forward, that's the yellow stuff on the right. That's going to go up to almost 35% of the total population to be more than 65 over the next, 30 to 40 years, right? Now, this is challenging for us here in the US. Anybody know what China looks like? China's demographics are like order of magnitude more challenging, right? In fact, there is one, it is an opinion piece, but actually, no, I think it was government data. They projected in 100 years, China's total population is going to be cut by 50%. That's a big deal. I mean, we have challenges here from a demographic standpoint here in the US. China's issues are like, it's just so much more challenging because of one child policy and all sorts of other things that affected all that. It's going to be a big deal, right? This is percentage population under the age of 25. So 1980s, almost half. Now it's 30% going forward. That's going to decline. What that means for us, some of us, is that there's no more senior discounts. There's so many older people. So that's what that means, right? These folks here are just now entering the workforce. So if you're trying to hire a young person, let's say in 10 years from now, the percentage of people available to you is only going to be less. So it's hard to find young people today. Going forward, it's going to be more challenging. So it's going to be difficult, right? And finally, here's a projection of 2040. Okay. Now, from a government standpoint, there's you have needs for workers, right? We know that, and one tool that the government has to deal with this is immigration. Now, presidential elections happen every 4 years. We'll see what happens with that, but the reality is here that many times the government will try to resolve these workforce issues is by adjusting immigration policy, right? The thing about immigration, though, is that when you have people that come in to do a job, and let's say they immigrate from somewhere else, and that kind of addresses your workforce challenges, what does that do to the host countries where these people are coming from? Deficits, right? So it doesn't actually fix it. All it does here, it changes the problem from here to over there. Right?
A lot of those immigrants send that money home.
Some of them do, absolutely, right? And that's another concern, right? It's a very difficult situation, but in terms of the fact that we need this job done, and we need people to do that, we need hands to do that work. Immigration is one tool that the government has. Again, I'm not expressing an opinion either way what's right or wrong. This is just reality of the tools that the government has available to address this, right? So it's really quite, in fact, if you look at the data though, is that if you were to let every single immigrant that wants to come in, it still is not enough to address the workforce challenges. It's not enough, right? So it's really quite fascinating, right? Okay, so I don't know. This is the best it's ever going to be. As hard as it is to find people today, this is the best it's ever going to be. Now, I've said thanks before. I just walk out and be like, okay, thanks. This is a horrible presentation. But now, right, there is, in my mind, there is hope here. And I want to spend the last couple of minutes just briefly talking about what that is here. Because at the end of the day, when you see people leaving us, yeah, when you see your employer talking to another employer talking to your top performer, what do you do? And the question is, which one are you in this picture? Is the liquor or the licky? But anyways, we move on. Okay. There's different things out here. This is an IFMA study that we published last year. And we looked at the role of mentorship on satisfaction. These are all facilities people. And we asked respondents, we had about 3,000 or 4,000 people respond in surveys. These are all FMs. And what we found here is that having a mentor across every measure of satisfaction, job satisfaction, improved across the board. Stability, outlook, pay, all of those things here that have a mentor. Now, it's not rocket science. It's not totally shocking here. But what this shows here is that we finally have some evidence that clearly points to having a mentor and setting this up is a really good way to address this, right? So we looked at mentorship. The reason why I bring this up here is that I'll see all the slides if you want to copy this here. But one thing we're doing here is we are setting up a new research program with IFMA next year about how to do mentoring in facility management. So we're going to talk to different chapters about how they set up mentoring. And the idea is to produce like a guidebook and a set of like tools and training and education to help people actually set up mentoring experiences. So that's going down the line. We're working on that right now with IFMA, and that's going on, right? So these are the realities. Lots of has-beens there before. Demographics are changing. Lots of good things too. And this kind of leads us into what the future actually looks like when we think about this, right? Now, the whole AI piece here is that if we can't find enough people, can AI actually fix these different things we're thinking about? Can AI build buildings? Absolutely not, right? Can it maintain our facilities? Absolutely not. But what it can do is help us know when we need to do something. It can get better at, hey, you might have an issue over here. You should probably take a look at it. Scheduling things, financing things, laying all these things out here. There are certain skills that AI as a tool can do extremely well. But I want to spend just a few minutes to talk about what AI actually is and where that might mean for us in the facilities in the future. The thing about AI is that it's not just some newfangled, CMMS system. It's not some new software tool product out there. It's fundamentally different from everything that we've seen before, right? So if you can believe with that, then that kind of changes how we think about what's going to happen with this here. Now, every single time there's been a major technological revolution, do people lose jobs? 100% yes. Every single time people lose jobs. However, what we also see is that when these jobs are lost here, what also happens? New jobs are created. The net benefit to society is more when there's some sort of advancement in technology, right? It's like the old story of the Ford Motor Company. If you asked Henry Ford what do you need, they would say, or people would have said, we need a faster horse, not a car. Like, a car is like not even a concept they could imagine, right? So that's what kind of AI is, but it's not a software program. It's different, right? And we're going to talk about why this is here. Okay. Do we have any chess players in the room by chance? Chess? A couple folks, a little bit, yeah. It's right here now, right? This image on the left-hand side here is called Stockfish. It's kind of like when people talk about can the computer beat you on chess, this is the program they use to benchmark, like, can you actually beat somebody on chess, right? Stockfish. Designed by humans, programmed by humans, plays chess, and it's been around for a long time. That's what it is. This logo on the right-hand side, this is Google DeepMind. DeepMind. It's called Alpha One. It's an AI program, and it can do different things. Almost like a side project, they taught AI, Google did, they taught it the rules of chess. Not strategy, just technicals. Here's what pawns do, here's what rooks can do. They just taught the rules of the game here. And I said, okay, Google, or okay, AI, train yourself for 4 hours using these rules here. And your goal is to do 2 things. Maximize the chances of winning and minimize the chances of losing, right? That's the rules they gave to it. 4 hours, it trained itself, learned how to game. And then what they did here is they had Google play against Stockfish. They played 100 games. What do you think the outcomes were? Alpha 1, the AI program, won 92 games. The other 8 were ties. Now, what makes this so interesting is AI, they did not give it any strategy whatsoever, right? Okay, well, Stock is okay, well, it's fine, it's a new program, we need to make some changes. They go back and change it, it's like 6 months later, they have the two play 1,000 games. AI won 200, it drew like 600, or no, it drew like 800, and the rest were, I think it had like 6 losses, right? Again, no strategy whatsoever. The thing about it is that when they're looking at AI and everything it was doing things that most human players would not do. For example, your queens in chess, like you want to protect your queens almost at all costs. And AI, when it was playing against the Stockfish, it sacrifices queen like in the 3rd move. Things that by conventional human wisdom are totally uncanny. Like you shouldn't be doing this sort of thing, right? So what this illustrates here is that when we think about AI, its ability to perceive and see all the different relationships and connections is far outpasses what a typical human player can do, right? In fact, this is Gary Kasparov. He's a grandmaster in chess. He watched this whole thing take place, and he said it's incredible, right? This here is Halcyon, and it's basically it kills bacteria, right? And what they did here is MIT researchers. This happened 2 years ago. They went to their AI machine. They fed it all the FDA database about different drugs and molecules and all the information they had available. And they said to AI, we have this bacteria that we cannot fight against. I want you to develop a solution that will kill this bacteria and also can't be toxic to humans. And also it has to be something brand new, never seen before. So they sent to the AI, fed it all the database, like 60,000 different molecules. It thought about it, I think it was like 4 or 5 hours. It came out and it produced what you're seeing here, right? And guess what? 100% effective. Now, you may not have heard about it, and the reason being is because of red tape. It's currently going in human trials. Now, human trial, I don't mean to suggest human trials are not important, but that's just going on right now. Now, what makes this interesting is that you talk to the researchers, the doctors that did all this, and we asked them, like, if you were to do, could you have come up with a solution by yourself in traditional scientific methods? The response is no. And the reason being is that it's too costly to do this. Most like scientific discoveries, like medicine, the way they do that is they test something, it fails, they test something different. Like imagine all the lab students, all the grad students in their petri dishes and like lab coats. That's how they come up with it. It's almost by accident, right? AI did this, no cost, 4 hours. And so if you just take this step further, get back to our longevity discussion, that if it can create this, and once it gets even better, what it can do, I mean, I think the reality of us, I mean, I'm not trying to be dramatic here. In the next 5 to 10 years, I think we could honestly have cures to like cancer. In our lifetimes, we might actually see the cure to some of these major diseases. Right?
Will it be affordable?
Well, the affordability aspect, I mean, it's interesting because if you have more competition, see, one thing AI does is it levels the playing field for certain types of people, right? And if you have lots of companies that can do this, and they can understand what this is here, there's more competition, which should help keep some of the cost aspect in check, right? Quite interesting.
But they are limiting the growth of AI.
There are
because
discussions.
Concerns and other countries
Yes.
aren't.
Yes,
So that could put us at a significant disadvantage.
it certainly could. There's talk right now. So, for example, California is looking to pass like an AI safety rule, policy, or regulation, or something like that. Hasn't passed, hasn't happened yet. There's a new White House piece that came out like last month that talked about how we're going to manage AI going forward here. And we're not exactly sure what this is going to turn into, right? Now, maybe today's the golden age, maybe it's all going to peter out and nothing's going to happen with it, but based on everything that I've seen with AI, what we're using with it, I don't foresee this happening because it can do so much here and it's really quite fast.
Whoever gets to the finish line first is going to win.
Whichever, when we say whoever, what we're thinking, we really mean here is whichever country.
Yeah, that's what I mean by.
Absolutely, yes, okay, yeah.
That's what
Really quite interesting, right? I'm running out of time here. This is a fighter jet totally run by AI. They have it in simulated dogfights. This is Secretary of the Air Force. He landed up there, flew around. They said, I would trust this AI F-16 to make wartime decisions more than then basically we will, right? There's your point.
I know,
Yeah.
that's what's scary.
So it's really quite fascinating where all this stuff is going to go. And of course, we know this is AI. So we talked about Chat GPT. Let me just give you a super quick definition when we talk about Chat GPT, what it actually means. GPT means generative pre-trained transformer. Okay, let's stop. What does that mean? Generative means it's creating something that has never been created before. It's responding to that response is unique, right? Pre-trained means we give a ton of data and we help the AI understand what it's looking at. And transformer means it looks at related pieces of information and makes those connections, right? So let me give you an example, and you all shout this out. Roses red, violets are blue. Okay. How'd you all know to say that? You've heard it a lot of times, you've heard it before. AI is kind of like that. It looks at all the information and tries to guess what's most likely to happen. Now, the thing about it is that violets, are they actually blue? They're kind of purplish, right? Rose red, violets are purple, it doesn't sound very good. Right? So it's actually incorrect. AI would certainly not do something, but they would know the story, right? This is a kid. He was sick for a long time. His mom went to 17 different doctors, couldn't figure anything out. She literally took all the MRI notes from all the doctors, typed everything to ChatGPT, and said, "Robot, tell me what's wrong with my son." And oh, by the way, he can't say crisscross applesauce. Went to ChatGPT, said, "Well, it's going to be." They suggested what's called prolonged spinal syndrome or something like that. And they went to Dr. 18, showed him the suggestion. The doctor said, "Well, we normally don't test for that because it's such a rare occurrence, but sure, why not? You've been struggling." They test for it, and guess what? Prolonged spinal syndrome. ChatGPT suggested. Now, am I saying we shouldn't rely on doctors anymore? Definitely. But take a step further here that if this gets it a little bit better and more intuitive in terms of what's actually happened here, it's going to be quite interesting to see what this can do going into the future. Okay, so final thoughts. Let's wrap all this up here. I think when you think about the future and where things are going with this here, is that generative AI like the ChatGPTs, Gemini's, Bards, Anthropic, all those other tools out there, those are available today. And my advice is to start using them immediately because they can really help out. They do make up stuff, they do hallucinate, it's not totally perfect here, but compared to what it used to be and what it can do today is really quite phenomenal. We have a bootcamp class we give at a rural workplace. We'll be giving at a Facility Fusion in Austin this year with IFMA, and we go through a 4-hour bootcamp about how to use Gen AI for facility management applications. Yeah.
You recommend taking a course, like say through Coursera or LinkedIn Learning?
I mean, you could. I mean, those are fine to do. But the thing about AI, so we're instructors. We get a lot of classes, and we have a pretty good feel how to teach stuff and do things like that. It's interesting with the AI stuff. It is changing so fast that honestly, as educators, we're having a hard time keeping up. It's like for the bootcamp class we gave at IFMA. I mean, we were presenting this class in Fusion last year in Boston. Like 2 weeks before we're going to present, there's a huge change to how ChatGPT. So Coursera and those things like that, you can do that. Those are fine. But as soon as it goes online and report it, it's already outdated. Honestly, my honest advice is just do it. You can literally go to chatgpt.com right now and start using it.
Need an RFP for an elevator service company.
Yes,
You can.
literally.
I've
Yeah.
tried that a couple times.
Yeah.
Just haven't had time to sit there, but yeah.
And so it's free. You don't have to pay anything for today. For ChatGPT, it's totally free today. The paid version, which is what we use and to recommend, is like an order of magnitude better. It's incredible what it can do. In fact, they have this a different model called O1 right now on ChatGPT. It's scary how good it actually is.
But be careful what information you put out there, because anything you put on ChatGPT is now public domain.
Yeah.
So don't put any confidential information.
Yeah, like employee records, I would not do that, but you can tell it not to, and again, the class we talk about, again, this is not an advertisement for the class, but we talk about what the limits are, what it can do. It's really quite fascinating. If you have an employee that's going on leave, you have to write a letter to everybody, tell them so-and-so will be out of the office. ChatGPT, great tool for that. Actually, what we found is that the best way to use ChatGPT is not writing letters, writing emails. It's like analyzing data. You can load Like, in fact, we had this one exercise to reload a CMS, work order data. It's like 1,300 work orders into ChatGPT. It can create charts. It can interact with it, ask it questions. Like, its ability to do data analysis is like stellar. It's uncanny how good it is, right? And think about how long has ChatGPT been around? I think today might be the anniversary. I think it's literally 2 years ago today it got released. I mean, you give this thing 3 or 4 more years, unbelievable. Now, what's interesting about this is that there's a lot of AI stuff out there, right? In fact, the last 12 months, there's been 6,000 new apps that are all AI enabled, right? Honestly, I mean, FMs, I don't have to tell you all this here, but my advice is that I would not buy anything right now, like an enterprise level AI solution. I wouldn't do it. I would wait like 18 months, 2 years to let itself sort out, right? Because it's a lot of marketing fluff. The Gen AI stuff is fine, but like buy this AI enabled CMS system, no way. I would not do that because they're still trying to figure it out. What I would do though, is that between now and the next few years, as they're working on this, there's going to be groups that are ready to go and adopt AI and those that are not. When the internet first came out, there's companies that completely embraced it as a core part of how they do business. And those companies are still around today, right? There's other companies that said, well, we'll have internet as a plugin to how we do our operations. And they suffered significantly. So when AI is actually ready for prime time, and we can actually do the things that are helpful to us on a wide enterprise level, the biggest thing that AI needs to be successful is what? Data. So I encourage you all to start getting your data organized in the next 2 or 3 years. Start tracking your workers, get organized from a data standpoint, because when AI is ready to go, those that are ready will be like light years in. In fact, I kind of think that once people start adopting AI and they're ready to go, like once it's prime time, it's going to be impossible to catch them because it can do so much so quickly, and that it's going to be quite interesting. So that's kind of what I know. In summary here, what do I know? Nothing. I don't know. I mean, AI could go away, and maybe that'll happen. But the reality of this here is that workforce is a big deal, and if AI can help us augment or plug some of the holes that we're seeing with workforce, this is certainly a big help. So. Thanks, folks, for having us. We're going to copy the slides. I'll be glad to do that or close and send out emails. I'll be glad to share all that. But
Yeah, if you just want to send it to me, then I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. That's all I got, folks. Thank you so much for having me. And,
Very good.
questions, comments? Otherwise, I'll turn the time over to.
Is there a certain platform that's good to start to learn on, or just ChatGPT?
So ChatGPT is phenomenal. We'll see what happens. Like, it's very, very competitive. There is Gemini, Google Gemini. But the thing about like it's interesting, like personally, like I'm surprised that Gemini, which is Google's AI, is not better than it is. Like compared to ChatGPT, it's not even close to how. But Google has all this data, all this money, and they're not nearly as good. I think the reason why is that when you look at about like ChatGPT, it's been laser focused on this is what we're doing. If you look at Google, in fact, there's some interviews with Eric Schmidt. They talk about this, that they've kind of gone left, and they've gone right, and they're kind of like zigzagging the way to where this is going to be. In the future, I think in a year or two from now, my recommendation will be different. Right? We're not like OpenAI families. Like it could certainly change based on what's going to be happening. But today, everything we've seen is it's incredible. I don't like it.
You actually type everything in like text, or can you upload like Excel files?
You can upload literally anything. You can upload literally anything to it. So I'll bring it up right now. Right?
That's very cool.
Yeah, I'm curious.
So this is can't see that. So this is here we go. Right. So you can upload anything. So one thing, you can literally upload anything to ChatGPT, any type of file. So one thing, for example, is that on Google Calendar, you can export your calendar. So as it's called a .ics file or some other export file. One thing I had a curiosity in is like, how often do I do certain types of meetings based on my calendar? I was curious about it. I export my entire calendar. I dumped it into ChatGPT, and it comes in the format of like, I can't even understand what it's doing. I wrote it on here, it thought about it for about 30 seconds, and it made a pie or a bar chart of the types of meetings I do in percentages. Based on a file, random file, right? So you can do all sorts of things. I mean, you can do image generation, create a picture. Oh, you guys can see that.
Yeah.
There we go. Create a picture of FM's learning about, right? There we go. We'll see what happens. Now, currently, the image generation for ChatGPT is pretty terrible, right? It's likely to be fixed in the future, where as of today, it's not very good because it just makes up random stuff. So here's some sort of image. Doesn't really matter, right?
That's not bad.
It's not bad, I guess. But like there's typos in the words, it's not spelled correctly, and there's all sorts of other things here. Do I have, and you guys can, I don't mind spending the time here, but I can show you how to do like my CMS. You want to do my CMS work order data example?
Yes, please.
Okay, let's do that real quick. Okay, so let me find my cursor here. Here it is. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to upload from my computer. And I'm going to go to here. Where is IFMA at? Okay. Okay. I've uploaded this data file. Right, I'm telling you it's work orders, but tell me about this file. Right? Tell me about this. Now, I'm going through here, right? Now, normally you could like show the table itself, but it's too big, so it's not going to do that here. I've not told it anything about what this file is. Nothing. And it's going to go through here, and it's going to summarize what it sees inside of this. These definitions is totally made up by ChatGPT. Inside of my Excel file, I'm not telling it what that actually means. It's looking at the data and making estimations as to what those actually mean in its opinion, right? So, okay, that's fine.
You can copy and paste, change whatever words you need to, and send it with the file to somebody, and
Yeah.
you look like you're great.
So that's fine here, but what about this? Create a bar chart that summarizes work order data by priority. Now, first off, there are numerous typos in here. ChatGPT doesn't care. It literally does not. In fact, my recommendation is don't worry about fixing typos. It literally does not matter. Okay. So let's go through here. It's analyzing all that data. This again is about 12 or 1300 data points, and it creates a bar chart. Okay. There you go. So there's low, none, medium. Okay, fine. Then you can interact with it too. Like show me the percentages. So hit go, and there we go. Normally you can press enter, but because I'm zoomed in so much, it's messing my formatting a little bit, but show me the percentages. Okay. And it does the percentages. Okay. Now, again, this stuff here on Excel, you could do it on Excel pretty easily. Okay.
Right.
Find any outliers and take them out and remake the bar chart. Okay. Now, if you're doing this by hand here, how long would that take?
So this would be difficult with Excel.
This would be difficult in Excel. Yes. It would be easy here, right?
You can even take two Excel charts and say, combine these charts, put them
Yep.
together, and do this. Instead of when we used to have to do all that, VLOOKUPs and all that crap. Don't have to do it anymore. Have AI do it for you.
Those are suggestions or something, so that they can just click on that box and be like.
Yep. So let's click on this analyze cost by department. See what that does. In fact, this is I was working on some data a couple weeks ago about space planning for a facility. I'll look at the average utilization. And I went through and I calculated what I thought was the answer. I had ChatGPT also do it, and it came up with a different number than I did. But actually, I was doing the percentage of leaves versus owned office space on average. So I calculated, had ChatGPT calculate just out of curiosity. It came up with a different answer. I was like, well, I guess ChatGPT failed, but let me try to understand what it tried to do and mess up. I went through it all, and guess what?
They were right.
There was a part of the data I forgot to update, and it went through it and it did all the stuff, didn't it? So it can create different charts and different things like that, but it's anyways. You can, like, one thing we do is we take multiple contracts and combine them together. So if you're trying to understand, like, what are the key differences from a language standpoint, are these contracts down? You can figure all that out. There is one AI tool we found, I forgot the name of it, it's called like Nexus AI or something. It'll take construction contracts and it'll tell you about, here's the risk you're exposed to as an organization. Because legalese, like typical legal language, is a little bit different from, you know, what this might be. So my advice, Kurt, just go. ChatGPT.com and just use it. You have an app, website, try it out.
Questions, call me.
And then go to Austin.
And then
When is that?
it's in Austin, April 28th.
I know.
It's a Monday before Facility
Fusion.
Yep.
How does it do on investing in the stock market? I'm just curious.
So I've played with that a little bit. I've asked it about, so ChatGPT, like, it won't do things that it knows are unethical. No, not that I was trying to do anything unethical here, but like, for example, one time I asked it, like, create a computer program that can hack my friend's email. And like, it stopped. It's like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
And I tried pressing it, and eventually what it will kick you out if like you really try to get it to do something that.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of investing, really, why I bring that up here is that I asked it, I wasn't going to rely on it for investing advice, but I asked it to explain some things I was looking at or whatever. And it gave me the answers. It said, by the way, you shouldn't rely on it to make your investment decisions. But if you understand, like, you're trying to understand different markets and different types of accounts and different types of investments and what strategies. Like, I actually created an investing plan for what we're trying to have, and then walk through, like, here's everything to think about, here's how you should diversify. I also told it, if the US government keeps printing money, inflation goes up, how should I change this investing strategy? It wrote like a whole 2-page summary about here's what you should think about if that happens. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. So thanks, everybody.